The sound of a gunshot echoed through the valley as Eleanor Rose clutched her stomach, feeling the flutter of life within her. It wasn't a bullet that had changed her world 6 months ago, but something far more devastating: a broken promise and a man who had fled town faster than tumbleweeds in a dust storm. Silver Peak, Colorado, 1878, was no place for an unwed mother, especially the daughter of the town's most respected schoolteacher. Eleanor hurried along the outskirts of town, her loose-fitting dress concealing her growing secret. At 22, she had believed Charles Wilton's promises of marriage before he disappeared with the traveling show, leaving her to face the consequences alone. She had managed to hide her condition from everyone in Silver Peak thus far, but time was running out. "Miss Rose," called Mrs. Patterson from her porch. "Haven't seen you at the socials lately. Your father says you've been poorly." Eleanor forced a smile, keeping her distance. "Just tired from helping Pa with his lessons. The spring term is particularly demanding." "Well, don't be a stranger. That new ranch hand of the Osborns, Mr. Yates, has been asking after you." Eleanor nodded politely and quickened her pace. Yorick Osborn. The name conjured the image of a tall, broad-shouldered man with eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade. He had arrived in Silver Peak 3 months ago, bringing with him an air of mystery and whispers of heroics from the Texas frontier. She had only spoken to him a handful of times, but each encounter left her flustered and worried he might somehow divine her secret. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Eleanor made her way to Widow Simmons' cabin. The old woman had been a midwife before arthritis gnarled her hands, and she was the only person Eleanor had confided in. "You're looking peaked, child," Widow Simmons said, ushering Eleanor inside the small cabin. "Sit before you fall." "I can't stay in Silver Peak much longer," Eleanor whispered, sinking into a chair. "People are starting to wonder why I'm suddenly so interested in loose-fitting dresses." The widow nodded solemnly. "My cousin in Denver could take you in. It's not ideal, but I can't leave Pa," Eleanor interrupted. "He's been alone since Ma died and his heart isn't strong. The scandal would kill him." "Then what do you propose to do when that baby decides to make its appearance?" Widow Simmons asked, her weathered face creased with concern. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. I just don't know." As Eleanor left the widow's cabin, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, mirroring the storm brewing in her heart. She took a detour through the woods, seeking solitude as tears threatened to fall. The first drops of rain began to patter through the pine needles as she reached a small clearing overlooking Silver Creek. Unable to hold back any longer, Eleanor collapsed against a large boulder, her body shaking with sobs. The rain increased, soaking through her dress as months of fear and loneliness poured out of her. She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats until they were almost upon her. Startled, Eleanor looked up to find Yorick Osborn dismounting from his chestnut stallion, concern etched across his handsome face. "Miss Rose," he called, approaching cautiously. "Are you hurt?" Eleanor hastily wiped her eyes, but it was futile in the downpour. "Mr. Osborn, I'm fine. Just caught in the rain." Yorick removed his duster and stepped closer to offer it to her. As Eleanor stood to accept it, a gust of wind plastered her soaked dress against her body, revealing the unmistakable swell of her belly. Time seemed to stop as their eyes met. Eleanor saw the moment of realization cross his face, followed not by judgment but by something softer, more complicated. She turned away, humiliation burning through her despite the chill of the rain. "Please," she whispered, "don't tell anyone." Yorick gently placed his coat around her shoulders. "Miss Rose, Eleanor, you need to get out of this rain." "I can't go back to town like this," she said, panic rising in her voice. "If anyone sees, my line cabin isn't far," Yorick said, gesturing toward the eastern ridge. "No one will see you there. You can dry off and we can talk." Against her better judgment, Eleanor allowed him to help her onto his horse. He led them through the rain to a small, well-kept cabin tucked among the pines on Osborn land. Inside, Yorick quickly built a fire while Eleanor stood dripping on the rough wooden floor, clutching his coat around her. "There are some of my shirts in that trunk," he said, nodding toward the corner. "They'll be big, but they're dry." Eleanor changed behind a blanket he respectfully hung for privacy. When she emerged in his oversized flannel shirt, Yorick had coffee brewing and was sitting at the table, his expression thoughtful rather than accusatory. "How far along?" he asked quietly. "6 months," Eleanor admitted, sinking into the chair opposite him. "The father was passing through with a traveling show last fall. He promised many things." Yorick's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "No one in town knows," Eleanor continued. "My father would be devastated. He's given everything to build our reputation in Silver Peak after Mother died. This would destroy him." "What do you plan to do?" Yorick asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. "I don't know," Eleanor confessed, tears welling again. "I've been hiding it as long as I could, but soon." Her voice broke. "I've considered going away, having the baby in secret, giving it up perhaps, but I can't bear the thought." Thunder rumbled outside as silence fell between them. Eleanor waited for the judgment, the disgust, the lecture she deserved. Instead, Yorick leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "I could be the father." Eleanor nearly spilled her coffee. "What? We could tell people we've been courting in secret, that we got carried away." He ran a hand through his damp hair. "It's not ideal, but it would give your child a name, protect your reputation." "Mr. Osborn, you can't possibly—" "Yorick," he corrected. "And I can. I've been watching you since I came to Silver Peak. You're kind, hardworking, respected. I've wanted to court you properly, but never found the right moment." "You can't marry me out of pity," Eleanor protested. "Not pity," Yorick said firmly. "Admiration, and perhaps something more given time." He hesitated. "I know what it is to be judged unfairly. My mother faced similar circumstances, though she never told me who my real father was. The man who raised me, who gave me his name, was a good man who stepped in when no one else would." Eleanor stared at him, searching for deception and finding only sincerity. "The town will talk. They'll count the months." "Let them talk," Yorick said with a shrug. "People tire of gossip quickly when there's nothing to feed it. We'll say we married in secret because of my unsettled past, that I have enemies and wanted to protect you." "Do you have enemies?" A shadow crossed Yorick's face. "None that would trouble Silver Peak, but it makes a convenient story." Eleanor looked down at her hands. "Why would you do this for me? For a child that isn't yours?" "Because I've seen enough of this world to know that kindness is rare and worth giving when you can." He reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. "I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give, Eleanor. A partnership, perhaps friendship. The rest can come with time if it's meant to." The rain pounded on the roof as Eleanor considered his offer. It seemed impossible, too good to be true, yet the alternative was unthinkable. "My father," she began hesitantly. "He would need to believe it too." "Then we'll convince him," Yorick said with determination. "I'll speak to him tomorrow, ask for your hand properly." "This is madness," Eleanor whispered, even as hope flickered within her. Yorick's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Perhaps, but sometimes madness is exactly what's needed." As the storm raged outside, Eleanor made the decision that would change her life forever. She would accept Yorick Osborn's outlandish proposal, never imagining the journey that lay ahead for them both. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous day's storm had washed the world clean. Eleanor returned home before sunrise, slipping into her bedroom through the window she'd left unlatched. Her father, Edward Rose, was already at the breakfast table when she emerged, dressed in her most modest gown with her hair neatly pinned. "You're looking better this morning, Ellie," he observed, peering at her over his spectacles. "Some color in your cheeks again." "I feel better, Pa," she replied, busying herself with the coffee pot to hide her nervousness. "The fresh air yesterday did me good." Edward Rose was a slender man with a scholarly stoop to his shoulders, prematurely aged by grief after his wife's death 10 years earlier. He had devoted himself to educating Silver Peak's children and raising his daughter with strict moral principles. The thought of his reaction to her pregnancy had kept Eleanor awake most of the night, despite Yorick's assurances. "Mr. Osborn from the Rocking O mentioned he might call today," Edward said casually. "Seemed quite intent on speaking with me about something important." Eleanor nearly dropped the coffee pot. "Did he say what about?" "No, but I have my suspicions." Her father's eyes twinkled. "He's been asking around town about you, Ellie. Not very subtle, that one." Before Eleanor could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Her heart leapt to her throat as her father rose to answer it. Yorick Osborn stood on their porch, looking nothing like the rain-soaked cowboy of the previous day. He was freshly shaved, his dark hair neatly combed, wearing a clean shirt and his best vest. He clutched his hat in his hands, revealing a nervousness that matched Eleanor's own. "Mr. Rose," he said, nodding respectfully. "I appreciate you seeing me this morning." "Come in, Mr. Osborn," Edward replied, stepping aside. "Coffee's hot if you're interested." "Thank you, sir." Yorick entered, his eyes briefly meeting Eleanor's with reassurance before returning to her father. "I've come on a matter of some importance." Edward gestured to the sitting room. "Then we should be comfortable for such a discussion." Eleanor followed them, perching anxiously on the edge of the settee while Yorick declined to sit. "Mr. Rose, I've come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage," Yorick stated plainly. "I know this may seem sudden to you, but Eleanor and I have been acquainted for some time now." Edward's eyebrows shot up. "Is that so?" He turned to Eleanor. "You've never mentioned this, Ellie." Before she could formulate a response, Yorick continued, "It's my fault, sir. I asked Eleanor to keep our courtship private. My past. Well, I've made enemies in my time as a Texas Ranger. I didn't want to put Eleanor at risk until I was certain my past was truly behind me." "A Texas Ranger?" Edward looked impressed despite himself. "You never mentioned that around town." "Not something I advertise," Yorick replied. "Draws the wrong kind of attention." Eleanor watched her father studying Yorick, weighing his words. "And now you're certain your past won't be a problem." "As certain as a man can be," Yorick answered honestly. "I've put down roots here with the Osborns. I'm not just a hand anymore, I'm partnering with them, building something lasting. I want to include Eleanor in that future with your blessing." Edward stroked his chin thoughtfully. "And what about you, Ellie? Is this what you want?" Eleanor met her father's gaze steadily, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. "Yes, Pa, Yorick is a good man. I love him." The words surprised her with their sincerity. Not a romantic love, perhaps, but something genuine nonetheless, gratitude, admiration, and the beginning of trust. Edward studied them both for a long moment. "Well, I must say this is unexpected. How long have you two been?" "Courting, since January," Yorick replied promptly. "I know it seems hasty, but when you find the right person—" "And you're sure about this, Ellie?" Edward pressed. "You've always been one to consider things carefully." "I'm sure, Pa," she said softly. "We want to marry soon, next week if possible." That raised both of Edward's eyebrows. "So soon? What's the rush?" Eleanor's hand unconsciously moved toward her stomach before she caught herself. Yorick smoothly stepped in. "Sir, To be completely honest, I've received word that an old adversary may have discovered my whereabouts. I'd feel better knowing Eleanor has my name and protection in case anything should happen." Edward frowned. "That sounds ominous. Should we be concerned about danger coming to Silver Peak?" "No, sir," Yorick assured him. "But I'd rather not take chances with Eleanor's safety or reputation." The mention of reputation made Edward stiffen slightly. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Yorick cleared his throat, looking appropriately abashed. "Only that. Well, sir, when two people care for each other as we do, sometimes propriety becomes challenging to maintain." A deep flush spread across Edward's face as understanding dawned. "I see." He turned to Eleanor, who couldn't meet his eyes. "Ellie, have you and Mr. Osborn—" "We love each other, Pa," she whispered, not exactly answering the question. A heavy silence filled the room before Edward sighed deeply. "I raised you better than this, Eleanor." "It's my fault entirely, sir," Yorick interjected. "I should have spoken to you sooner, done things properly. But I assure you my intentions have always been honorable." Edward paced the small sitting room, clearly wrestling with disappointment and practical considerations. Finally, he stopped before Yorick. "Can you provide for my daughter? Give her the life she deserves?" "Yes, sir," Yorick said firmly. "I've saved most of my ranger pay over the years. My partnership with the Osborns includes land of my own adjacent to theirs. I've already started building a proper house. And you'll treat her well, honor and protect her, with my life, sir." Edward turned to Eleanor, his expression softening. "Is this truly what you want, Ellie, not just what you think you need to do?" Eleanor rose and took her father's hands in hers. "Yorick is a good man, Pa. I trust him. Please give us your blessing." After what felt like an eternity, Edward nodded. "Then you have my consent. But I expect things to be done properly from this point forward. A church wedding, even if it's small." Relief washed over Eleanor so intensely that she felt lightheaded. Yorick steadied her with a hand at her elbow, a gesture not lost on her father. "Thank you, sir," Yorick said sincerely. "You won't regret this." "See that I don't," Edward replied, his tone carrying a warning despite his acceptance. "Now, I believe the two of you have plans to make, and I have lessons to prepare." After Yorick left with promises to return the next day, Edward called Eleanor back as she tried to slip away to her room. "Ellie," he said quietly, "are you in trouble, child?" Eleanor froze, her back to her father. "What do you mean?" "I'm not blind, nor am I a fool," Edward said gently. "You've been ill for months, avoiding town, wearing your mother's old dresses. And now this sudden engagement to a man you've barely spoken of." Eleanor turned slowly, tears filling her eyes. She couldn't lie to her father's face, not directly. "Yorick is a good man," she repeated. "He wants to take care of me, of us." Edward's face crumpled briefly before he mastered himself. "How far along?" "Pa, please, how far, Eleanor?" She swallowed hard. 6 months." Edward sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 55 years. "And Osborn is the father," the moment of truth. Eleanor hesitated, then whispered, "He's the father my child needs." Understanding passed between them. Edward closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this revelation. "Does he know?" "Yes, he still wants to marry me." Edward was silent for a long moment. "Your mother would have handled this better than I," he finally said. "She was always the stronger one." "Are you ashamed of me?" Eleanor asked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Disappointed," Edward admitted, "but not without hope. Osborn seems a decent sort. Better than most would be in these circumstances." He looked up at his daughter. "I won't ask about the real father. I assume he's not in the picture." "No," Eleanor confirmed, "and never will be." Edward nodded slowly. "Then we move forward. The wedding will be next Sunday after services." Simple, dignified. We'll tell people you've been courting quietly due to his colorful past. Thank you, Pa, Eleanor whispered. Don't thank me yet, Edward warned. This won't be easy, Ellie. People will talk, count months. Silver Peak has a long memory. We'll manage, Eleanor said with more confidence than she felt. Yes, you will, her father agreed, because that's what roses do. We endure. The following week passed in a whirlwind of preparations and carefully managed announcements. Eleanor was surprised by the genuine support of several townswomen, who seemed charmed by the romantic notion of a secret courtship necessitated by Yorick's mysterious past. Others were clearly skeptical, particularly Matilda Henderson, the banker's wife and town gossip. Engaged for months and no one noticed. Matilda questioned during a fitting for Eleanor's wedding dress a modest ivory creation being hastily altered by Mrs. Jenkins, the seamstress. That seems rather unlikely in a town this size. Yorick is very private, Eleanor replied, standing still as Mrs. Jenkins pinned the loose fabric. His work as a ranger taught him caution. Matilda circled Eleanor like a hawk eyeing its prey. You're looking rather robust for a bride. Most girls waste away from pre-wedding nerves. Mrs. Jenkins saved Eleanor from responding. Now, Matilda, not everyone loses their appetite over a wedding. Some bloom with happiness. She winked at Eleanor. And a winter of your father's hearty stews would fill anyone out a bit. Eleanor gave the seamstress a grateful look. Mrs. Jenkins had been a friend of her mother's and seemed to have guessed Eleanor's situation without judgment. Will you be moving to the Osborn ranch after the wedding? Mrs. Jenkins asked, deliberately changing the subject. Yes, Eleanor confirmed. Yorick has a cabin there for now, but he's building us a proper house on his portion of the property. How romantic, Mrs. Jenkins sighed. A man who builds a home for his bride. Matilda sniffed dismissively. Let's hope he's as good at being a husband as he allegedly was at catching outlaws. Though I've never heard of any Ranger Osborn in the newspapers. He didn't seek glory, Eleanor defended, feeling a surge of protectiveness. He did his duty quietly. Well, I suppose we'll see what kind of man he really is, Matilda said with a pointed look at Eleanor's midsection. When she had gone, Mrs. Jenkins straightened up from her pinning. Don't mind her, dear. Matilda has always had more vinegar than honey in her. She knows, Eleanor whispered, horrified. She suspects, Mrs. Jenkins corrected, as do others. But a respectful marriage goes a long way toward quieting wagging tongues. She patted Eleanor's hand. Your mother would be proud of you for making the best of a difficult situation. Would she? Eleanor asked doubtfully. I've made such a mess of things. Life is messy, child, the seamstress said wisely. What matters is finding good people to share the mess with. Your Mr. Osborn seems like one of the good ones. He is, Eleanor agreed, realizing she truly believed it. Though he's not really mine, not in the way people think. Mrs. Jenkins smiled knowingly. Not yet, perhaps, but I've seen the way he looks at you. Give it time. The seamstress's words stayed with Eleanor as she prepared for her wedding day. She had seen Yorick only briefly throughout the week, as he was busy making the cabin suitable for a wife and unborn child. Each time they met, usually under her father's watchful eye, she discovered new aspects of his character that impressed her: his quiet competence, his dry humor, his unfailing kindness. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. Eleanor stood in her bedroom, examining her reflection in the mirror. The wedding dress skillfully concealed her condition, though she knew it wouldn't fool everyone. Her hand rested on the swell of her belly, feeling the baby's movements. I'm doing my best for you, she whispered. He may not be your blood father, but I believe he'll be a good one. Talking to yourself is the first sign of madness, her father said from the doorway, his attempt at humor undermined by the emotion in his voice. "You look beautiful, Ellie, like your mother." Eleanor turned, suddenly anxious. "Are we doing the right thing, Pa?" Edward crossed the room and took her hands. "I don't know if it's right, but it seems the best path forward. Osborn appears to be a man of his word." He squeezed her hands. "And he looks at you the way a man should look at his bride. You've noticed that too." "I may be old, but I'm not blind," Edward said with a small smile. "Whether this began as a practical arrangement or not, I believe there's genuine feeling there." Eleanor wasn't sure what to make of that observation. She was grateful to Yorick, respected him, even felt drawn to him in ways that confused her. But love, that seemed too much to hope for. "It's time," her father said, offering his arm. "Your groom awaits." The Silver Peak Church was full that morning, curiosity about the hasty wedding drawing even the most infrequent churchgoers. Eleanor walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes fixed on Yorick standing before Reverend Phillips. He wore a new suit and had trimmed his beard, but it was his expression that caught her breath, a mixture of awe and tenderness that seemed impossible to fake. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Yorick took Eleanor's hands to recite his vows, he added his own words, spoken softly enough that only she and the Reverend could hear. "I promise to protect you and your child as my own, to build a life worthy of the trust you've placed in me, and to try each day to be the husband you deserve." Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes as she responded with the traditional words, unable to find her own to match the sincerity of his. When Reverend Phillips pronounced them husband and wife, Yorick's kiss was gentle, respectful, yet held a warmth that made Eleanor's cheeks flush. They emerged from the church to the cheers and well wishes of the town, though Eleanor couldn't miss the calculating looks and whispered comments from some corners. Yorick's hand remained steady at the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd to the waiting wagon that would take them to their new home. The wedding breakfast at the town hall was mercifully short, with Yorick skillfully deflecting two personal questions about their courtship and future plans. By early afternoon, they were heading toward the Osborn ranch, Eleanor sitting close to Yorick on the wagon seat as much for warmth as for appearance's sake. "Are you all right?" he asked as the town receded behind them. It was a lot to face. "I'm fine," Eleanor assured him. "Better than I expected, actually. People were kinder than I deserved." Yorick frowned. "Don't say that. You deserve every kindness. Even after what I've done, especially then," he said firmly. "Making mistakes doesn't make you less deserving of compassion." They fell into comfortable silence as the wagon wound its way through the foothills toward the sprawling Osborn ranch. When they crested a rise, Yorick pointed to a stand of pines in the distance. "That's our land there. The cabin's just inside those trees near the creek. It's not much yet, but the house foundation is laid. By summer, we'll have a proper home." "The cabin will be fine," Eleanor said. "It's more than I could have hoped for a month ago." Yorick glanced at her, his expression troubled. "I want you to be happy here, Eleanor. Not just grateful or relieved, but truly happy." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. "I think I could be," she admitted. "In time." As they approached the ranch proper, several cowboys called out congratulations. The main house door opened, and an older couple emerged, Jack and Margaret Osborn, Yorick's employers and partners. "There they are," Margaret called, waving enthusiastically. "Bring that bride over here, Yorick. We've got a proper welcome waiting." Yorick guided the wagon to the house. "I hoped we might stop briefly," he explained to Eleanor. "The Osborns have been like family to me. Margaret's been cooking for days." "Of course," Eleanor agreed, suddenly nervous about meeting these people who were important to her new husband. Yorick helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. The gesture wasn't lost on Margaret, whose eyes twinkled with approval. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Osborn," she said warmly, embracing Eleanor. "We've been telling Yorick to settle down for months now. Should have known he'd do it in his own time and choose so well." Jack Osborn, a weathered man with kind eyes, shook Eleanor's hand. "Good to have another sensible woman around here. Lord knows we men need the guidance." Inside, the Osborn home was warm and inviting, with a table laden with food. To Eleanor's surprise, her father was already there, deep in conversation with another man she recognized as Judge Parker from the county seat. "Pa," she questioned, "I thought you were staying in town today." Edward Rose smiled apologetically. "Slight change of plans. The Osborns kindly invited me, and I thought there might be some business to attend to." Eleanor looked questioningly at Yorick, who seemed equally confused. Margaret bustled forward. "Come, sit down, everyone. The food's getting cold." As they gathered around the table, Judge Parker cleared his throat. "Before we begin, there's a matter I'd like to address." He produced some official-looking papers from his coat. "Yorick asked me some time ago about the legal process for adopting a child. I've brought the necessary documents, in case you wanted to proceed today while I'm here." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth as she turned to Yorick, who looked both surprised and moved. "I did ask," he confirmed quietly to her, "but I didn't expect the judge to bring everything today. We don't have to decide now if you're not ready." Through her tears, Eleanor saw the gift he was offering, not just his name for her child, but a legal claim that could never be challenged. She nodded, unable to speak. Judge Parker smiled. "Excellent. We'll handle it after we eat." Nothing should come between a man and Margaret Osborn's roast beef. The meal passed in a pleasant blur for Eleanor. She watched Yorick interact with the Osborns and her father, saw the genuine respect they had for him, and felt a growing certainty that she had made the right decision. After dessert, the judge brought out the adoption papers. "Now, these will become effective upon the birth of the child," he explained. "They establish Yorick as the legal father for all purposes. The birth certificate will carry his name." "What about the biological father?" Eleanor asked hesitantly. "Could he ever make a claim?" "Not if he's abandoned you and the child, which I understand is the case," Judge Parker assured her. "These papers protect both you and your husband from any such claims in the future." Eleanor signed where indicated, her hand steady despite the enormity of what they were doing. When Yorick added his signature, he met her eyes with such conviction that she had to look away, overwhelmed. "Congratulations," the judge said, stamping the documents. "In the eyes of the law, as well as society, this child will be a true Osborn." As the afternoon waned, Yorick suggested they should head to their own cabin before dark. Eleanor embraced her father, promising to visit soon and thanked the Osborns for their kindness. "Take good care of her," Jack told Yorick gruffly as they prepared to leave. "I intend to," Yorick replied, helping Eleanor back into the wagon. The winter sun was setting as they approached the cabin tucked among the pines. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lantern light glowed in the windows. "Someone's there," Eleanor said, alarmed. Yorick smiled. "Just making sure everything was ready for us. Probably Mrs. Osborn or one of the hands." He stopped the wagon and turned to Eleanor. "I know this is all happening very fast. I want you to know that I don't expect. That is, I understand if you need time to." Eleanor was touched by his awkwardness. "It's all right, Yorick, I understand." "Do you?" he asked seriously. "Because I meant what I said in my vows. I want to be a good husband to you in whatever way you need me to be. If that means separate bedrooms for now or forever, I'll respect that." The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. "Let's just take it one day at a time," she suggested. "We're still getting to know each other." Yorick nodded, seemingly relieved. "One day at a time," he agreed. "Starting with this one." He jumped down from the wagon and came around to her side. "May I carry you across the threshold, Mrs. Osborn? For luck." Eleanor smiled and allowed him to lift her, marveling at how easily he managed despite her increased weight. At the door, he paused. "Welcome home, Eleanor," he said softly before carrying her inside. The cabin was small but well built, with a main room combining kitchen and living areas, and two doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the table was set with a simple dinner and a small bouquet of winter greenery. "Margaret," Yorick explained, setting Eleanor gently on her feet. "She insisted on making things proper for you." Eleanor moved around the cabin, taking in the solid furniture, the clean curtains at the windows, the bookshelf already containing some of her favorite volumes that must have been brought from her father's house. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "So much nicer than I expected." "The bedroom on the right is yours," Yorick said, bringing in her trunk from the wagon. "I've taken the smaller one. The facilities are out back, I'm afraid, though I'm planning indoor plumbing for the new house." Eleanor appreciated his thoughtfulness. "This is more than enough, Yorick." "Thank you." As night fell, they shared the meal Margaret had prepared, talking easily about the ranch, Eleanor's teaching experience, books they had both enjoyed. It felt surprisingly normal, as if they were truly a newlywed couple beginning their life together, rather than virtual strangers bound by an extraordinary arrangement. After dinner, Eleanor found herself yawning, the emotions of the day catching up with her. "You should rest," Yorick said, rising to clear the plates. "It's been a long day." Eleanor didn't argue. In her room, she found her nightgown laid out, her personal items arranged thoughtfully. She changed, washed up with the water provided in a porcelain basin, and was about to get into bed when a sharp pain made her gasp. The baby kicked forcefully, as if reminding her of its presence on this day when so much had changed. Eleanor placed her hand on her belly, feeling the strong movements. "I know you're there," she whispered. "We're going to be all right now." A soft knock on the door startled her. "Eleanor, is everything okay?" Yorick called. "I thought I heard." "Just the baby kicking," she replied, wrapping her robe around herself. "It's quite active tonight." There was a pause. Would it be inappropriate to?" Eleanor opened the door to find Yorick standing awkwardly in the hallway. "Would you like to feel it?" she offered, understanding his unspoken question. Yorick nodded, his expression a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. Eleanor took his hand and placed it on the side of her belly where the baby was most active. After a moment, there was another strong kick. Yorick's eyes widened in wonder. "That's amazing," he breathed. "Hello there, little one." The tenderness in his voice brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. This man who owed her nothing was already forming a bond with her unborn child. It was more than she had dared to hope for. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Yorick's hand lingered a moment longer before he reluctantly withdrew it. "Sleep well, Eleanor," he said softly. "I'll see you in the morning." As she climbed into bed, Eleanor realized that for the first time in months, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised Eleanor with its ease. Each morning, Yorick rose before dawn to attend to ranch duties, returning mid-morning to check on her. Eleanor kept the cabin, prepared meals, and began planning a small garden for the spring. In the afternoons, Yorick often worked on their new house, the framework of which was rising steadily on a gentle slope overlooking the valley. Eleanor's father visited regularly, gradually warming to Yorick as he witnessed the genuine care the young man showed for his daughter. The townspeople's curiosity eventually subsided, though Eleanor still felt occasional stares when she ventured into Silver Peak for supplies. As her pregnancy progressed, Yorick became increasingly attentive. He fashioned a rocking chair for the porch where she could sit in the strengthening spring sunshine. He brought home books on childbirth and infant care, studying them with the same intensity he applied to ranch ledgers. "Have you thought about names?" he asked one evening as they sat by the fire, Eleanor knitting a tiny blanket while Yorick whittled a wooden rattle. Eleanor looked up, surprised. "I've had some ideas, but I wasn't sure if you'd want to. That is, I thought you might have family names or traditions." "It's your child," Yorick said gently. "You should choose." "Our child," Eleanor corrected him, the words feeling right. "At least that's what the papers say and what we're telling the world." Yorick's hand stilled. "Yes, but I don't want to overstep." "You're not," Eleanor assured him. "I'd like your input. After all, this baby will carry your name." A pleased smile spread across Yorick's face. "Well, if it's a boy, I've always been partial to Samuel, after my adoptive father." "Samuel," Eleanor repeated, testing it. "I like that. For a girl, I was thinking of Grace." "It was my mother's middle name." "Samuel or Grace Osborn," Yorick nodded approvingly. "Good, strong names." As the due date approached, Eleanor found herself increasingly grateful for Yorick's steady presence. He arranged for Widow Simmons to stay in the spare room for the final week, ensuring Eleanor would have experienced help when her time came. One particularly warm April evening, Yorick took Eleanor to see the progress on their house. The structure was nearly complete from the outside, with work continuing on the interior. "I thought we could put the nursery here," he said, leading her through what would become a bright, airy room with windows facing the morning sun. "And our bedroom would be across the hall." Eleanor turned to him, surprised. "Our bedroom, I thought." Yorick colored slightly. "I meant, that is, I hoped eventually, but of course separate rooms are fine if you prefer." Eleanor studied his face, seeing the careful hope there. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved in ways neither had anticipated. Their hands sometimes lingered when they touched. Their conversations extended late into the evening. Eleanor had caught Yorick watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, with an expression that made her heart beat faster. "I don't know what I prefer yet," she admitted honestly, "but I'm glad you're thinking of the future." "I think of little else," Yorick confessed. "Especially a future with you and the baby in it." Before Eleanor could respond, a sharp pain seized her, causing her to gasp and clutch her belly. Yorick was at her side instantly. "Is it time?" he asked, his voice steady despite the alarm in his eyes. "I think so," Eleanor managed as the pain subsided. "But it could be hours yet before." Another contraction cut off her words, coming much sooner than she expected. Yorick didn't hesitate. He swept her into his arms and carried her carefully back to the cabin, calling for Widow Simmons the moment they were within earshot. What followed was a night of pain and fear, unlike anything Eleanor had experienced. The labor progressed rapidly, giving lie to the widow's prediction of a long first birth. Yorick refused to leave, despite the older woman's insistence that men had no place in a birthing room. "I'm staying," he said firmly, holding Eleanor's hand as another contraction tore through her. "Unless Eleanor wants me to go, stay," Eleanor gasped, clinging to his strength. "Please stay." As midnight approached, Eleanor's strength began to wane. The pain seemed unending, and fear crept in as she heard urgency in the widow's voice. "The baby's turned wrong," Widow Simmons murmured to Yorick. "We may need the doctor from town." "No time," Yorick replied, his face grave. "Tell me what to do." While the widow gave hurried instructions, Yorick knelt beside Eleanor. "Listen to me," he said, his voice calm but intense. You're the strongest woman I know. You can do this. We're going to help you, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Eleanor nodded weakly, beyond words. "Good," Yorick said, squeezing her hand. "Because I love you, Eleanor Osborn, and I'm not about to lose you or this baby, so fight. Fight like hell." Through her pain-hazed mind, Eleanor registered his words. He loved her, not out of duty or kindness, but truly loved her. The revelation gave her renewed strength as the final, most difficult phase of labor began. With Yorick supporting her and the widow guiding the baby, Eleanor pushed with everything she had left. When the first weak cry filled the room at exactly midnight, tears streamed down her face. "A boy," Widow Simmons announced, cleaning and wrapping the tiny red-faced infant. "A strong, healthy boy." She placed the baby in Eleanor's arms, and despite her exhaustion, Eleanor felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. The child had a shock of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, she saw they were deep blue. "Samuel," she whispered, looking up at Yorick, who stood transfixed beside her. "Samuel Osborn." Yorick's eyes glistened as he reached out a tentative finger to touch the baby's cheek. "He's perfect," he said hoarsely. "Eleanor, he's absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold your son?" Eleanor asked, the deliberate choice of words not lost on either of them. With reverent care, Yorick took the bundled infant into his arms. "Hello, Samuel," he said softly. "I'm your father." The simple declaration, spoken with such conviction, brought fresh tears to Eleanor's eyes. In that moment, watching Yorick cradle her son, she knew with certainty that the arrangement they had begun out of necessity had become something far more meaningful. The days following Samuel's birth were a blur of exhaustion, joy, and adjustment. Yorick proved himself an eager, if sometimes clumsy, father, insisting on helping with every aspect of the baby's care. Eleanor's father visited, bringing gifts and barely concealing his emotion at becoming a grandfather. News of the birth spread quickly through Silver Peak. Despite some raised eyebrows at the baby's apparent early arrival, the traditional gifts and well wishes flowed in. Margaret Osborn became a regular visitor, providing advice and occasionally taking the baby so the new parents could rest. One afternoon, when Samuel was about 2 weeks old, Eleanor awoke from a nap to find the cabin quiet. Concerned, she rose and looked for Yorick and the baby, eventually spotting them through the window. Yorick sat on the porch in the rocking chair, Samuel asleep on his chest, while he read aloud from one of his books. Eleanor watched unobserved, her heart full. Yorick handled the baby with such natural affection that no one would ever question he was the father. In every way that mattered, he was. She stepped onto the porch and Yorick looked up with a smile. "We didn't want to wake you," he explained. "The little man and I have been discussing the finer points of cattle breeding." "I'm sure he found it fascinating," Eleanor laughed, settling on the porch step beside them. "He's a captive audience," Yorick agreed, gazing down at the sleeping infant. After a moment he asked more seriously, "Are you happy, Eleanor?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes," she answered honestly. "Happier than I ever expected to be again." "Good," Yorick said, seeming relieved. "Because I've been thinking. That is, I was wondering if you might consider." "Consider what?" Eleanor prompted when he hesitated. Yorick took a deep breath. "Making this marriage real, in every sense." His eyes met hers, vulnerable yet hopeful. "I meant what I said that night Samuel was born. I love you, Eleanor. I think I have almost from the beginning, though I tried not to. I understand if you don't feel the same or if you need more time, but..." Eleanor rose and placed her fingers gently against his lips, stopping his words. "Yorick Osborn, for a man of action, you certainly talk a lot." She leaned down and replaced her fingers with her lips, kissing him softly. When she pulled back, Yorick looked stunned. "Does that mean?" "It means I love you too," Eleanor said simply. "I'm not sure when it happened. Maybe it was watching you build our home, or seeing you study those baby books, or the way you held my hand through every contraction. But somewhere along the way, what began as gratitude became something much deeper." Yorick carefully shifted Samuel to one arm so he could pull Eleanor closer with the other. "I never thought I'd find this," he confessed. "A family of my own." "Neither did I," Eleanor admitted, "especially not after everything. Everything that happened brought us here," Yorick pointed out. "I can't regret any of it." They stayed on the porch as the sun began to set, talking softly as Samuel slept on, secure in his father's arms. When the evening grew cool, they moved inside, placing the baby in his cradle. That night, Eleanor invited Yorick into her room for the first time. Their coming together was tender and unhurried, a true beginning rather than the culmination of their journey. Later, as they lay entwined, Yorick traced patterns on her skin. "I was thinking we might move into the new house next month," he said. "It should be finished by then." "I'd like that," Eleanor murmured sleepily. "Though this cabin has been a good home. The first of many we'll share," Yorick promised. "I was also wondering if you might consider teaching again. The school board mentioned they'll need someone in the fall." Eleanor raised her head to look at him. "You wouldn't mind, with the baby and the ranch?" "Mind? I think it's a wonderful idea. You love teaching and you're good at it. We can work out the details. Maybe your father would help with Samuel part of the day." The thought warmed Eleanor that Yorick would support her returning to work, that he saw her as more than just a wife and mother. "I'd like that," she said again, settling back against him. "Though I'm in no hurry. Right now, this is exactly where I want to be." "Me too," Yorick agreed, pulling her closer. "Exactly where I belong, in the darkness." Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun in desperation had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. The life growing inside her 8 months ago had seemed like the end of everything she'd hoped for. Instead, it had become the beginning of everything she never knew she wanted. Outside their window, the vast Colorado sky spread like a blanket of stars over Silver Peak. Within their small cabin, nestled among the pines, a family that fate and choice had created slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that love, in all its unexpected forms, was the strongest foundation of all. 5 years later, the summer sun beat down on the sprawling ranch house as Eleanor Osborn hung the last of the laundry on the line. From the corral nearby, she could hear Yorick's deep voice mingled with childish laughter as he helped 5-year-old Samuel sit atop his first pony. "Mama, look at me," Samuel called, his face alight with excitement. "I see you, sweetheart," Eleanor called back, shading her eyes. "You look like a real cowboy, just like Papa," the boy declared proudly. Eleanor smiled, watching as Yorick adjusted Samuel's small hat and demonstrated how to hold the reins properly. The bond between them was unshakable, a father and son in every way that mattered. Samuel had Yorick's mannerisms, his expressions, his quiet determination, proof that family was made by love, not merely blood. "Mama, baby's awake," came another voice from the porch, where 3-year-old Grace sat with a picture book, her dark curls escaping from her braids. "Coming, darling," Eleanor replied, making her way to the house where their youngest, 4-month-old James could be heard fussing in his cradle. The house Yorick had built for them had expanded along with their family, a sprawling, comfortable home with large windows overlooking the valley, indoor plumbing as promised, and rooms filled with books, toys, and the collected treasures of their life together. Inside, Eleanor lifted James from his cradle, smiling as his fussing immediately ceased. With his pale blonde hair and blue eyes, He looked remarkably like Yorick's mother, whose picture sat proudly on their mantelpiece. "Is Uncle Edward coming for dinner?" Grace asked, following Eleanor inside with her book. "Yes, sweetheart. Grandpa will be here soon." Edward Rose had retired from teaching the previous year, passing the position to a younger man while Eleanor continued teaching advanced students twice weekly from their home. The sound of hoofbeats announced visitors approaching. Eleanor moved to the window, expecting to see her father, but instead spotted Margaret Osborn's buggy coming up the drive, followed by a rider she didn't recognize. "Yorick," she called through the open door. "The Osborns are here, with someone else." Yorick lifted Samuel from the pony and set him on the ground, ruffling his hair before striding toward the approaching visitors. Eleanor watched as he greeted them, then stiffened visibly when the stranger dismounted. Something in Yorick's posture, a tension she hadn't seen in years, sent a chill through Eleanor despite the summer heat. She set James in his cradle and took Grace's hand. "Sweetheart, go play with your brother for a bit. Tell him to show you his pony, but don't get too close without Papa." When the children were safely occupied, Eleanor stepped onto the porch, watching as Yorick and the visitors approached. Margaret Osborn looked troubled, Jack grim, and the stranger, a well-dressed man perhaps a few years older than Eleanor, carried himself with an air of entitlement that set her nerves on edge. "Eleanor," Yorick said as they reached the house, his voice carefully controlled. "This is Charles Wilton. He says he has business with you." The world seemed to stop. Charles Wilton, the name she had tried so hard to forget, belonging to the man who had abandoned her and her unborn child without a backward glance. He looked prosperous now, his clothes expensive, his manner confident. "Mrs. Osborn," he said, removing his hat with a slight bow. "It's been some time." "Mr. Wilton," Eleanor acknowledged coldly. "What brings you to our home?" Charles glanced at the Osborns, then at Yorick. "Perhaps we could speak privately." "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my husband," Eleanor replied, moving to Yorick's side. His arm went around her waist, solid and reassuring. Charles's eyes narrowed slightly. "As you wish. I've recently learned that you bore a child shortly after our acquaintance. I've come to see him." "Why?" The question came from Yorick, his tone dangerously quiet. Charles straightened. "Because he's my son. I have a right." "You have no rights here," Yorick interrupted, his voice still level but with an edge that made Margaret Osborn step back. "You forfeited any claim when you abandoned Eleanor. The boy is my son, legally and in every other way that matters." Charles's expression hardened. "I understand you've been caring for him, and I'm prepared to compensate you for that. But now that my circumstances have improved, I intend to provide him with the advantages I can offer." "Advantages?" Eleanor echoed incredulously. "You mean taking him from his home, his family, the only father he's ever known?" "I'm his father," Charles insisted. "No," Eleanor said firmly. "You contributed to his existence, nothing more. Yorick is his father, the man who held him when he was born, who taught him to ride, who reads to him every night and makes him wooden toys and kisses his scrapes when he falls." Charles looked past her toward the corral where the children played. "Is that him, the older boy?" "Stay away from my children," Eleanor warned, stepping forward. "All of them." "I have legal rights," Charles began, but Jack Osborn cleared his throat. "Actually, young man, you don't," the older rancher said. "Judge Parker handled the adoption papers himself before the boy was born. Samuel is legally Yorick's son in every respect." "Adoption?" Charles looked genuinely shocked. "But you were gone," Eleanor reminded him bitterly. "You left me alone and pregnant, remember? Said you'd send for me, then disappeared." Yorick stepped up and gave Samuel his name, his protection, his love, something you never offered. Charles had the grace to look uncomfortable. Things were complicated then. I wasn't ready for a family. But I am now, and I have the means to provide for the boy. His name is Samuel, Yorick said quietly, and he's not for sale or trade. Margaret Osborn stepped forward. I think you should leave, Mr. Wilton. You've upset this family enough. Charles hesitated, looking from Eleanor to Yorick. I didn't come to cause trouble, I just thought. When I heard I had a son. You don't, Eleanor said simply. You had a chance to be a father 5 years ago. You chose differently. For a moment, something like regret flickered across Charles's face. I understand your anger. But perhaps in time, no, Yorick interrupted. There won't be in time. Samuel is our son. You showing up now only confuses and hurts him. I won't allow that. Charles studied Yorick for a long moment, seeming to measure the determination in the other man's stance. Finally, he nodded slightly. I see I've made a mistake in coming here. He turned to Eleanor. I am sorry for how things ended between us. I was young and selfish. Yes, you were, Eleanor agreed, unmoved. And now you need to go. Charles replaced his hat and turned to leave, then paused. He looks happy, the boy. He is, Yorick confirmed, and he'll stay that way. After Charles had mounted his horse and ridden away, Jack Osborn shook his head. That took guts, showing up here like that. Or arrogance, Margaret added with a sniff. Thinking he could just waltz in and claim a child he abandoned. Eleanor leaned against Yorick, suddenly exhausted. Do you think he'll come back, try to take Samuel? Yorick's arm tightened around her. He can try. But the law's on our side, and so is every person in Silver Peak. Samuel is an Osborn through and through. Margaret patted Eleanor's hand. We just came to warn you he was asking questions in town. Matilda Henderson mentioned you'd had a baby early in your marriage, and he put the pieces together. Thank you for the warning, Eleanor said gratefully. Would you stay for dinner? My father's coming too. We wouldn't miss it, Jack assured her. After all, it's Samuel's birthday next week. We need to discuss his present. As the Osborns moved toward the house, Eleanor held Yorick back. Are you all right? She asked, searching his face. Shouldn't I be asking you that? Yorick replied, his expression troubled. Seeing him again after all this time meant nothing, Eleanor finished firmly, except reminding me how fortunate Samuel and I are to have found you. Yorick's features softened. I was so angry, seeing him standing there, thinking he had any claim to our son. Our son, Eleanor repeated, her heart full. That's all that matters. A shout from the corral drew their attention. Samuel was waving excitedly, while Grace danced around the pony with childish delight. Papa. Can I show Grandpa my pony when he comes? Samuel called. Of course you can, son, Yorick called back, his smile returning. He'll be very proud of what a good rider you're becoming. As they watched their children play, Eleanor thought about how differently things might have turned out if Yorick hadn't found her crying by Silver Creek that stormy day. If he hadn't offered to be a father to a child not his own. If they hadn't built a love on the foundation of that selfless act. What are you thinking about? Yorick asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. How sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best, Eleanor replied, reaching up to touch his cheek. How grateful I am that you found me that day. Yorick turned his head to kiss her palm. I think perhaps we found each other, exactly when we both needed it most. From inside the house came the sound of James beginning to fuss again, while Margaret Osborn's laugh mingled with Grace's excited chatter. The life they had built together, imperfect, challenging, but filled with love, surrounded them like a shelter against all storms, past and future. Hand in hand, Yorick and Eleanor walked toward their home, secure in the knowledge that some choices made in moments of crisis or courage have the power to transform lives forever. What had begun with a cowboy's compassion and an unwed mother's desperation had become the foundation for a family bound not by blood or obligation, but by something far stronger: love freely given, every single day. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting golden light across the valley they called home, Eleanor Osborn knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't change a single step of the unlikely journey that had brought them all to this moment of perfect belonging.